everybody, and welcome back to the Kelly Green Hour as we are here to preview the Monday Night Football matchup between your Philadelphia Eagles and the Seattle Seahawks. I'm your host, LJ Harrell, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Connor Donald. Connor, you mentioned it before we came on. It's a good thing we delayed this a day because there's some injuries that we have to talk about that could be big time heading into this game Monday night.
Absolutely. I mean, if we had recorded last night, we probably would have had such a different game plan and perspective on this game because, like you said, there's been 3 players announced to be out. One that was kind of like Darius Slay came as a bit of a shocker. He wasn't practicing, but we didn't know the extent of what happened until today. And then Jalen Hurts is sick, and it's all making for a very stressful lead into Monday night. Let's just say that.
Yeah, Slay didn't practice at all last week either and still played. But yeah, with him having arthroscopic knee surgery this week, they say he'll be back before the end of the season. And Avonte Maddox, they're going to open up his 21-day window next week. So there's a potential of him coming back over the next couple of weeks, which will help as long as he can stay healthy. As always, before we get started, please follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHarrell54. And follow Edge of Philly Sports on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook at Edge of Philly Sports. And then if you're tuning in live, please let us know your thoughts on this upcoming game as the Eagles will be leaving for Seattle tomorrow, I would assume. I don't think they will leave tonight. They'll leave tomorrow. You get to get out to the Great Northwest, a team that is also struggling. And after this gauntlet of games the Eagles went through, we thought potentially these last 4 games could be a way for the Eagles to get some momentum, get some confidence going into the playoffs. But with the injuries, as we mentioned, Zach Cunningham, probably the best linebacker on the team, he's out. Cam Jurgens, starting right guard, he's out. Darius Slay, starting cornerback, he's out. And we kind of want to talk about some of the things he said this week in terms of his play compared to the team play. And then Jalen Hurts is sick. And then on the Seattle side, Geno Smith is questionable, I think. I think it was questionable. I think he played. If the game was Sunday, I don't think he would play. But with the game being Monday night, I think he's going to play. So we should see Hurts versus Geno Smith. And the Seattle Seahawks have receivers. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Zach Charbonnet coming out the backfield, Noah Fant, the tight end. Like, they have a lot of skills on that skill. They have a lot of weapons at the skill positions on that offense. And if the front 4 cannot get to Geno or Drew Lock, whoever's going to start quarterback, it could be a long day for the back 7, which is something we have said a lot this year.
Yeah, I mean, but before I get into it, by the way, also, I was advised tonight, maybe the first night we are live on Instagram. StreamYard and Instagram now apparently pair, and we are the first show that might be there. I didn't double check my work to make sure that was for real, but I've been told it may be for real.
Sports Instagram page? I'm about to pull it up.
It is. Well, you go take a look while I comment on your comments. I absolutely agree. I mean, this is a offense in the Seattle Seahawks that has kind of been weird. They're not a bad team, but, Geno Smith has kind of regressed from last year, and the offensive line is still not that good. So I feel like there's a couple things that work against them this year that could have made them a lot better if they had maybe a better quarterback or maybe a better offensive line. So, but I mean, we can't deny the weapons. I mean, I don't know if Kenneth Walker will be playing, but Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, if they're both out there together, they're going to make it a miserable night for Philadelphia, especially minus Zach Cunningham. I mean, you talked about Noah Fant. He's not a massive threat, but if he's called upon when other people are being covered, like DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Tyler Lockett, he will be able to make some plays for them when called upon, especially against this linebacking group who the last time we saw them, yes, they played a far superior San Francisco 49ers team, but they looked like they would have been really bad against some of the worst teams in the NFL or some of the worst offenses in the NFL. So being without Zach Cunningham, I just pray some more that Shaq Leonard has grasped enough of the defense to get. Well, Nick Moore has to be on the field. The worst part is we have no Christian Ellis. So now you're pretty much stuck with a Shaq Leonard and Nick Morrow duo.
They could do what they did a couple of weeks ago, maybe do like a hybrid with Sidney Brown have Shaq Leonard be the main guy if he a couple weeks in the offense, and then go with Sidney Brown as your like Malcolm Jenkins type when he was here under.
And that feels like, to me, that feels like the best plan. Use Sidney Brown, use a safety, use, if you can get 3 safeties out there, use 3 safeties over having Nick Morrow out there, because Nick Morrow, since those couple of games that he had really good games, we were like, oh my gosh, how could we cut this guy? He has shown why we cut this guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we'll see what happens. But like you said, I mean, I really do hope Shaq Leonard has a grasp of he kind of has no choice but to have a grasp of the defense. It helps that Reed Blankenship is out of concussion protocol. And look, I say it all the time, like by default, he's our best safety, but that doesn't really mean much because of who he's back there with. But I think the big thing was there was a report that Kevin Byard convinced Sean Desai to let the secondary do their own work on the offensive, the receivers for Seattle. And like, when you take a step back, it's like, okay, I like the players wanting to be accountable, but the fact that they don't, does that show that they don't have faith in the defensive coaches to come up with a game plan, to come up with a scouting report on the receivers for Seattle? Because obviously the secondary has not looked that great. Like individually, some players may have, big play Slay, but as a unit, they have not looked good. And is that because of them, or is that because of the position they're being put in by the coaching staff?
Yeah, and that's the thing you look at, because I mean, I've seen people who have crunched the tape on this Philadelphia Eagles defense, and it looks like Sean Desai, like from, if you're thinking about it, he's just trying to work with what he's got. But at the end of the day, when people breaking down the tape, it kind of shows in many different scenarios throughout a game that he's not putting the players in a position to succeed either, based on the usage of certain players in certain scenarios. And that makes me wonder, it's probably a mix of both, but it is a responsibility of your defensive coordinator to know his players' strengths and to put them in positions to make plays, or put them in positions where they are strongest and can be most successful. So to me, I end up sitting there, and I know I've seen Shane Half talk about this a lot throughout the week. There's a lot of blame falling on both of these coordinators, but it's all about putting your players in the position to succeed. And it feels like Brian Johnson may not be putting Jalen Hurts in a position to succeed, but it feels like on the defensive side of the ball, it's more of a, they're not schematically putting anybody in a situation to succeed, which is extremely frustrating to see defensively, because we've talked about it throughout the season. Some of these guys it's some of this defense is really, really talented, and it is not looking the part at all. If Bradbury has a good game, Slay doesn't. If Slay has a good game, Bradbury has a bad game. So something is not right about how this defense is being set up to succeed. And I almost think, like, when you think about it, because I've seen some polls out there, which coordinator are you more worried about? And it feels like a lot more is falling on the offense than is the defense. And I don't know, I'm kind of curious to your perspective while we're talking about the defensive coordinator, Sean Desai. Do you think you're more worried about the defensive coordinator or the offensive coordinator, in your opinion? And what's your take on this, on the question you asked me?
Well, so I can understand why people say Brian Johnson, is because the offense is intact. There is talent on the offense. Jalen Hurts, Dallas Goedert, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, DeAndre Swift. There's talent there. Pretty much the only thing that really got replaced was the offensive coordinator. We see what Shane Steichen has done with Gardner Minshew in Indianapolis. And when he had Anthony Richardson, they were able to move the ball. Like, he's still able to move the ball. He's really creative. And you see what Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni are doing with the offense now. And while they're averaging 27, 28 points a game, it just looks stagnant. As somebody said, it looks predictable. We barely use any motion. And I'm not saying motion is going to be the end-all, be-all for this offense. But, if they're not able to push the ball down the field, they don't have any hot routes on blitzes, which they haven't had in a couple of years. Last week, they only threw the ball to 3 players. Like, I can understand why people say it's the offense that gives them, or it's the offensive coordinator that they're worried about. because when you look at Sean Desai, besides the front four, like the linebackers have been a revolving door. The safeties really aren't that good. There's been more injuries on that side of the football. So he's, as you kind of mentioned, he's playing with the card that he's dealt in terms of the players that he has. So I think that, I mean, look, I'm not happy with Sean Desai with the way he it's weird though, because he's made adjustments in second halves, like half the games this year, and then doesn't seem to make adjustments in other games. The first Dallas game, they didn't have Slay shadowing CD Lamb, and Slay actually did a decent job on Lamb, while Lamb went and torched everybody else that he went up against. So I mean, I don't know. It's so hard. I don't think, and again, this is the end of the season thing, I don't think either coordinator gets fired. But with the reports of, say Kevin Byard going to Sean Desai about the scouting reports, if that is really true and it has continues on, and the secondary looks better because the players themselves are doing scouting reports, that's got to be a red flag to Howie Roseman. And Howie Roseman is going to have to go to Nick Sirianni and say, we look better. Now, granted, they're not playing as talented as the offenses. Again, Seattle has really good receivers have really good weapons at the receiver position. But then you have the Giants, then you have Cardinals. So they could look better. But that's going to be a red flag saying, okay, why isn't Sean Desai and this defensive coaching staff doing this? What is the disconnect there? And maybe that will be a reason to get rid of Desai. But I don't think either is going. And it's easy to be all on Sean Desai because of the way the defense has looked. Worst third down defense, one of the worst red zone defenses. Can't get off the field. The rushing defense looked good the first 6, 7, 8 weeks of the year and hasn't looked good since. So it seems like the trajectory for the defense has gone downhill from the first half of the year, while the offense has been up, down, up, down, up, down. So from my perspective, I'm more concerned about Sean Desai, but he is playing with less than Brian Johnson is right now.
Yeah, and I see that, and I agree with that. Like, the offense has been fairly healthy, except for really Cam Jurgens. Pretty much Jurgens has been one of the only pieces that's been in and out throughout the season, and Goddard was out also. And I mean, they said, oh, well, without Goddard, they're double teaming AJ Brown more, and then we got Goddard back last week, and it still didn't look that good. I think the biggest difference in the offense is they're not running the football. They're not controlling time of possession. And this is something we've spoken about over the last 4 games. While they've won 2 out of the 4 games, in 3 of the 4 games, they didn't control time of possession. And in that 4th game, they controlled time of possession, but it was the game against the Chiefs. And it makes you really wonder, based on the time of possession, because of it being an overtime game and such an offensive heavy game, was that the reason they were able to control possession? And it wasn't even like they controlled it by very much. And I mean, when you look at the offense overall, they're averaging 358 yards per game, and
they should be in the 400s.
They should be closer to the 400s. I mean, there's only 2 there right now, which is Miami and San Francisco, but they should be better than they are. And then people will say, but look at the last 2 or 3 games. Well, in the last 3 games, they're at 345 yards per game. So it's not even like they're that much worse based on the last 3 games. They're looking at these games. And we saw it last week. They can move the ball really well from a yards per play perspective. It's the turnovers, and it's just the lack of any type of consistency in the game. You'll get going with the run game, and then suddenly it's 2 or 3 straight passes, or you're passing the ball, and then on 3rd and 4, here you are suddenly going for a handoff or a QB draw. It just doesn't feel like they have consistency in their play calling or consistency in any type of any of the offense altogether. And I mean, I get it for Desai. He's playing with what he's been given for some of these, and there's been a lot more injuries. We saw Reed Blankenship out. Zach Cunningham's been out for periods of time. We haven't really missed anyone on the defensive line a whole lot this year, but it doesn't feel like just bringing 4 is getting home like it did last year. But we did kind of speak to this on the last episode, that you can't really expect to get that record-breaking sack number again with this type of change in strength of schedule. You had such an easy schedule, such a notoriously easy schedule last season, and this season it's a lot harder. it's just not the same. You go from having a bottom part of the standings where your whole division base, the team that got in for your division was one game above 500 that year, to having a strength of schedule where you're coming off a year where you were where you went to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. So obviously things are going to change a whole lot from a strength of schedule perspective. But even then, I mean, while the front four has been able to get home against some of the weaker teams, it's actually kind of been disappointing to watch them against some of the better teams, because they haven't been able to get anywhere near, like last week, I think it was 3 sacks, but it wasn't that all that impressive. Against San Francisco, I think they had 2 sacks. It hasn't been impressive, and they're not winning the turnover battle, which is huge. We talk about the turnovers on offense, but to the same point, the defense isn't forcing turnovers at all. And again, that begs the question, is it because Sean decides not putting them in a position to create turnovers? Or like even last year, is this defense just inept at their ability to create turnovers altogether? Because even last year, we didn't create a lot of turnovers. This year, it looks a lot worse because the offense is committing a lot more turnovers this year than they did last year.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the 10-3 teams, the Eagles have the worst point differential. I think they're at plus 21. While the other San Francisco and Dallas are at over plus, and I think even Baltimore might be over plus 100 in their differential. And then like the turnover differential, the Eagles lost the turnover battle last week 3-1. And again, 2 of those turnovers were in the red zone. You don't turn the ball over, you at least get field goals potentially. And maybe that's a different game. In the San Francisco game, the first 2 drives where they got field goals, you put one of them in the end zone, it's a 2-score game, and you have Purdy playing behind by 2 scores instead of just 6 points, and maybe that's a totally different game. All this does matter, and like the expectations shouldn't change. Look, the Eagles went through the tough stretch. Dallas, then a bye, then the Kansas City coming off a bye as well, then Buffalo, and then San Francisco, who had a 10-day rest, and then Dallas, who had a 10-day rest. Like, all that matters when you talk about it. Like, the body having more time to rest up, to heal up, that matters. And those 2 teams were able to have that advantage. And when you think about it, like, let's be real. For the Niners, they talked all offseason about beating the Eagles. So they did it. Like, they came out, they kicked our ass, and you got to applaud them. For Dallas, like, their Super Bowl is beating the Eagles because they can't get past the second round. And it's going to be the same thing this year. They're not going to get past the second round. It doesn't matter if they have to win the East or not. They're still going to lose in the second round of the playoffs because that's what they do. So, like, now the Eagles Dallas has their tough stretch. I'll put that in quotes because Buffalo on the road, then Detroit, who hasn't been playing well, then Miami, and then Washington. And then the Eagles again, Seattle, Giants, Arizona, Giants. After this Seattle game, there's potential of them not having to get on a plane until maybe the NFC Championship game where they would have to go to San Francisco, potentially. Unless they went out and San Francisco loses to Baltimore or loses a game unexpectedly, then the Eagles wouldn't have to get on a plane until potentially the Super Bowl. Like, so now that this is supposed to be the chance for the Eagles to get confidence, to fix their bodies. Obviously, the injuries aren't going to help. I'm looking at some of the stuff in the chat. Quentin, what's up? Thanks for joining us. Says the Slay News just gave me one more thing to worry about. Yeah, again, like Connor said at the beginning, I wasn't expecting that. But look, they've been playing. The quote unquote fortunate thing about the injuries that they've had in the secondary, like Ringo's he got a lot of snaps last week. Ricks has gotten a lot of snaps throughout the week. Josh Jobe got a lot of snaps earlier in the season. Bradley Roby is kind of in there at the slot position until potentially Maddox comes back. So they have guys that are out there able to play, but when you look at the weapons for Seattle, who's running with DK Metcalf? Who's going to run with Tyler Lockett? Who's going to run with Jackson Smith? Like, it's going to be tough. It's going to be that Ohio State. I think Bradley Roby went to Ohio State. The Ohio State battle in the slot with Roby versus with Smith and Jigba. But is Bradbury going to stay on the one side of the field, or is he going to go with Metcalf? Who knows what's going to happen? It's definitely not a good week for the Eagles to have injuries at the secondary position going up against this team. And then Quentin says, I want to play Geno Smith regarding the Eagles game. I think he's going to play. If it was a Sunday game, he wouldn't. But it's a Monday game. I think he's going to play. We'll see. He can get the ball out quick. Again, the Eagles have not beaten Seattle since 2008. 2008. It's been 15 years since the Eagles beat Seattle. They got to find a way to get this monkey off their back. And if they can't, I mean, if the Eagles lose this game, I can't imagine the airwaves on, the local radio. I can't imagine what the Eagles Twitter is going to be saying, because we're already at that like panic point. But they lose 3 in a row, the world's over. Pretty much.
Yeah, and like, I mean, you can semi-respect the 49ers. I hate to say it, but you can semi-respect the Cowboys' loss because they were rolling. These offenses are rolling. They've been doing well. You cannot respect a loss with or without Geno to the Seattle Seahawks. In my eyes, you just can't respect. I mean, you could. But I mean, they're a 6-7 team. It's a team you should be able to beat. It's a defense that ranks in the bottom 10. It's an offense that ranks in the bottom 10.
Devin Witherspoon.
Yeah. There's players to like, but at the end of the day, I was just looking at the stats. They're in the bottom 10 across the board defensively. If you're in the bottom 10 across the board defensively, this is a team this offense needs to get right against. Mm-hmm. When I'm thinking about it, like, yes, I get the defense is taking a lot of flack and having a hard go of it. But the offense has looked equally as bad, if not worse in most situations, because they can't get things going. This is a game where you're up against a bottom 10 team, rushing, passing, total, points allowed. You have to get right against this team. You have to, from an offensive perspective. If this is a game to bail out your defense, knowing the injuries that are there with Darius Slay, with Zach Cunningham, the struggles that the defense has been having, this has to be the get-right game where Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni can tip their hat to Sean Desai and say, we got you. This has to be that get-right game.
They should
and looking
DeAndre Swift.
Agreed. I was going to get to that too. But just to look also at the turnover perspective, the 3 teams that are being talked about ahead of us right now, 49ers plus 11 in turnover differential, Cowboys plus 10, Ravens plus 4. The Eagles are minus 4, tied with the Atlanta Falcons, and just ahead of the Las Vegas Raiders and the New York Jets. Just to put it into perspective for how bad it is. And we have the second lowest interceptions in the NFL. We are tied with about 3 teams at 6 interceptions, and the only team with less is the Tennessee Titans with 3.
You know who had 6 interceptions last year for the Eagles? Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. By himself in missing 5 games.
I mean, we can sit here and argue about that, but I think at the end of the day, I think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson has a bad representative who gave him bad advice. And he thought, look, I'm getting this great deal and I'm going off, when Howie probably had this, one of his really deep, insightful contracts where you really have to dig into it and really understand the contracts in football. Because judging by the sounds of it and the way that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson talked versus the way we know the Eagles operate, I trust the Eagles. I believe the Eagles. I don't believe Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I think the Eagles were giving him more money. It was just, kind of deferred payments and money moved around in a way that they didn't like the look of it on paper.
Well, he thought he was going to get more elsewhere.
That too.
I think if obviously with hindsight being 2020, he might just sign that deal with the Eagles. And obviously once he said no, went looking else, the Eagles decided to, bring back Bradbury and bring back Slay. And then when he probably came back, they were like, sorry, bro, we don't have money. It's unfortunate. I would love to have a 25-year-old back there in the secondary that's able to make plays. Now, I know he's been out. He probably wouldn't have got hurt with the Eagles. You never know.
Just saying, looking at the Darius Slay extension that happened, you probably could have fit Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in, and you probably could have made it work for both parties. Just saying. But I digress.
It would have been nice. But like you said, they do have to figure it out. They need to figure out the safety position. I don't know if they bring Byard back. They can't move off of Bradbury and Slay, so I mean they're kind of forced to be there. It would have been nice if maybe they wouldn't look, as much as we all love Nolan Smith, maybe a Joey Porter. And again, I'm not a Penn State guy, so I wouldn't have liked it. But like seeing how he's been playing with Pittsburgh, Joey Porter Jr. at the pick number 30, that could have probably helped. You wouldn't have had to bring back both Bradbury and Slay, and you would have a young guy that's ready to be a number one corner. But again, we'll see what the Eagles are able to do going forward the rest of this year and then going into the offseason, which we'll worry about hopefully after February 12th or whenever they
yeah, I hope so too. Steven was actually in the comments at 5:49 p.m. So almost an hour and a half before we went on. But he said to be competent defensively, Ringo needs to be ready with Slay out. He was better than early in the season where he looked like more of a safety out there. And offense has to be great, which we've been talking about. But Steven, I agree with Steven. If Ringo and Ricks are going to be the answer, this is one of those teams where you have to be able to go out. They're tough receivers. We said it. They're tough receivers. You're probably going to be tasked with I'm going to guess that James Bradbury will probably be on DK Metcalf most of the night. But you're going to end up having to be on a very good receiver, whether that's JSN or whether that's Lockett. You're going to be tasked with that assignment, and you have to prove that you can do it. You can win, and you can win however you need to. Ringo, I find Ringo and Ricks are more aggressive guys early in the play. So this is one of those things where I feel like Ringo and Ricks might look worse than they are because they're not being set up in a position that they should be to succeed. They're being forced to play that off-ball game, which they're not actually as good at as maybe a Slay or maybe a Bradbury. It's more like, the situation with Rasul Douglas. Douglas is a lot better when he can get hands on you early and make you really work and make you have to try and get by him.
I feel like that's like what defensive coordinators, coaching staffs feel like they have to do with young guys. When a lot of times maybe they just want to be aggressive and let them go out there and be aggressive and see how they do.
If they miss, then you have the conversation or you say, okay, this isn't working out. We got to change something up. That's where you make those adjustments. And that's where Sean Desai is just sticking to certain things that just aren't working out well. And Ringo and Ricks, that's just what they were doing best in college, was being able to be up on a guy, playing with their hands. Ringo's a big guy. He's a lanky guy. He needs to be able to be up in their face playing and be able to make a play on the ball as close as possible, not trying to necessarily read. Like Ringo and Ricks were never known overly well through scouting reports as being these, high IQ guys like, Bradbury or Slay are. These guys were guys who can make a play on the ball if given the opportunity to make the play on the ball and to be aggressive. So I'm hoping that Ringo and Ricks are given the opportunity to go and give it a shot. I mean, how much worse could things get from a defensive perspective and the injuries that we have? You need to start changing some strategy and changing some things about how you play. And this feels like a game where you just have to make those changes. And it shows with the whole comment about Byard saying, let us do the scouting, let us try helping you with the strategy of the game.
Yeah. And then since we are talking about the Eagles defense, I kind of want to touch base on, we mentioned the receivers, but the offensive line for Seattle is so. And like, if the Eagles aren't able to beat them, and I feel like we say it all the time that like the Eagles have the advantage at the defensive line against the opposing team's offensive line, and then they go out there and get a sack or don't get any sacks and get pressure on the quarterback. But Charles Cross, Damian Lewis, Evan Brown, Anthony Bradford, and then Abraham Lucas or Jason Peters, our old friend. The Eagles have to be able to go out there and win those battles. Jalen Carter has to get back to his dominant ways. Maybe he hit a rookie wall. You never know. But again, it's up to and again, one of the keys, and I think we say it a lot, is it's up to this front four to win their battles, to get pressure after Geno Smith or Drew Lock, whoever's going to start at quarterback, to help the back seven, because we're obviously going to be light at linebacker. Shaq Leonard's going to play a lot of plays, most plays he's played probably in a month, in a new defense. And again, we've touched base on Ringo, Ricks, Job, whoever's going to be the other cornerback. So it's going to be up to that front four. It's going to be up to Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, Jalen Carter, Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis, Brandon Graham. It's up to those guys to be able to get after the quarterback and get him down and, not allow him to escape, not allow him to step up. And, because when the quarterback's able to step up, then the receivers go to recess mode pretty much, or playground mode. And that's definitely where our secondary does not hold up well at all.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I'm just looking at it now. They rank in the bottom 10 for pressures allowed at 176 and sacks allowed at 24. And they've played 493 passing snaps. Three of the teams ahead of them have played 528, 598, and 555 passing snaps. So they haven't even played. They played a lot of passing snaps, but not even as much as some of the teams that are ahead of them who've played way more and are giving up equal or higher sacks and pressures. So this. I agree with you. Like this front four has to start getting home. I get they're pressuring with just the front four sometimes is frustrating. There's no blitz. This is a time for Desai to also try and bring the blitz periodically or try some different things schematically to bring some pressure, because this is an offensive line that isn't going to stand up well against the pressure. And the front four should be able to win some of these battles. This should be a night where the front four is able to get 4 or 5 sacks. Get back to that. I hate to point out last year because we just talked about how we shouldn't compare it to last year, but a opportunity to look like last year's form, because this is actually an offensive line that isn't that good after playing two fairly good offensive lines. That kind of makes sense why you may have struggled a bit getting pressure with the front four. There's no reason the front four can't get home.
They better. All right, so let's jump over to the Eagles offense. There was all the talk this week of them doing the fumbling drill, and how they made Jalen Hurts go through it, fall down, hold on to the ball. And a lot of people were clowning the Eagles, but while it may seem kind of high school Harry-ish, might seem stupid, the fact that they made the $250 million starting quarterback, franchise quarterback, do that shows that everybody needs to be held accountable. So we could have all these beat reporters, fans of other teams, clowning Jalen Hurts, clowning the Eagles, but if it helps, that's awesome. It better help, though, because if Jalen's fumbled, I think, in 7 straight games, which is ridiculous. If he fumbles again, I don't know what the heck, what's going on with him. But they need to figure out a way not to turn the football over. And the biggest thing is, I mentioned it, touch base on it, run the freaking football. DeAndre Swift should have 17 carries at least. This would be a game, they won't do it, but this should be a game that you unleash Rashad Penny too. Activate Penny. Let Penny go out there. He's got 5 carries on the entire year, probably has been active for 2 games. I don't understand what they're holding him for. It's December. There's 4 games left. You have a division title to try to go win. Let him, and he's got motivation against his former team. So let him go out there. Let him be the backup running back. Let him go out there, show some power behind this offensive line. Now, obviously, it's going to be different because Cam Jurgens isn't playing. Sua Opeta is going to get the start at right guard. So if you're going to run to that left side, but they need to get the running game going. And it'll start with DeAndre Swift, but I really think that they should give Penny a chance.
I couldn't agree more. We talk about it, I think, week in and week out, how frustrated we are that Rashad Penny hasn't been given the opportunity, and he continues to not be given the opportunity, even though the use of Boston Scott is only in the kick return game, which continues to frustrate us beyond any end.
I mean, they don't
you
return
can
the
put
balls anyway.
you can put anyone back there to wave their hands that they're not going to return the ball. You can put anybody back there. You can put Jalen Hurts back there and just wave, because that's all you need to do.
You
because
can put nobody back there.
You could put nobody back there. You could just tell the ref, hey, we're going to wave this off, let him kick it through. At the end of the day, nobody, that's literally Boston Scott's almost sole reason that he's on this team. And obviously the fact that, similar to Kenneth Gainwell and similar to some of these players that the Eagles are stuck on, they cannot give up on this player. And I mean, Seattle, 10th worst rushing defense in the league. They're giving up 123 yards per game. It's time you run. It's not pretty. It's not fun. For us, it's, watching it is not always the funnest when you're watching 1 yard here, 3 yards here, then you break out like a 10 or 12-yard run. It's not always the funnest to watch at. They can be ugly football games, but that is where we've been winning football games, controlling possession and rushing the damn football. And we're not talking quarterback draws constantly or RPO options where you end up doing the quarterback draw. We are talking,
because Hurts, when he pulls it, he just slides before the line of scrimmage. They need to stop calling that play if he's not
playing as aggressive as he used to, which makes people probably wonder, oh, well, maybe he is injured. Maybe there is something. But to me, I mean, if he's injured, and you're continuing to do the same strategy that you've been doing. It's almost felt like since the beginning of the season that he's been running like this. If he's that injured and it's been something you were concerned about at the beginning of the season, get the ball out of his hands. Pure and simple, plain and simple. Just to me, it's so plainly obvious. Like if something's up, to just hand the ball off and let the running backs do their job. DeAndre Swift's been really good when being given the ball. Kenneth Gainwell has been surprisingly good when given the ball. Even Boston Scott's been able to deliver sometimes. Rashad Penny can probably deliver better than Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell combined, but yet we're not giving him the opportunity. And like you said, this feels like if there was a game to give the man a chance, it would be the revenge game. It would be the game against his old team to just say, go out there and run hard. You and DeAndre Swift, let's see what you can do. But it's not a good run defense. It's one that you need to take advantage of and that's just scheme up a nice, friendly game. If Jalen Hurts isn't feeling good, if he's under the weather, scheme up a simple game. Enough of these 20, 30 air yard throws. Scheme it easy. Use the slants. Use the middle of the field where you were begging for Dallas Goedert to be back, and he was back. And yet you look at the route running of AJ Brown last week, and all it was deep right, deep left, maybe two routes that were in the middle of the field where we know that he can dominate and he can win after the catch. And they're just not using two of their best weapons in the middle of the field in Dallas Goedert and AJ Brown like they should be.
And throw the ball to the running backs out of the backfield. They didn't get any passes. Looking at the defense for Seattle, which the fact that they're bad against the run is kind of weird. They have Leonard Williams, who's good up front, Jaron Reed, good up front. Their linebackers, and Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks are pretty good. Frank Clark is like, so it's weird that they're bad against the run like that. And you look at their secondary though, Devin Witherspoon, who's battling with Jordan Davis for defensive rookie of the year. They have Tariq Woolen, who should have and could have won defensive rookie of the year last year. They gave it to Sauce Gardner. And the safeties, Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs is really good. They have Julian Love, former Giant. So like they have they have some good players on this defense. So we can't take them lightly. You have to find a way, like you said, to open up the deep shots if you want to take a potential deep shot here, deep shot there. And that's by running the football. And like Eagles fans we love when you run the football. I still don't understand why, but it works. We're usually right about it a lot of the times, like run the football. Remember after the Raiders game 2 years ago, and then they came back against Detroit, ran the ball like 50 times and ran for over 200 yards. And Sirianni was like, "Oh, okay, this does work." So we'll see what happens. Michael, thanks for joining us. He says Jalen is still hurt. I mean, Brian Johnson hasn't cared about running the ball or quick three drop step passes to help Jalen. Now he hasn't cared about running the ball. The three step drop thing, like I don't know if that's they don't have it in the offense. B, maybe Jalen just doesn't get rid of the ball quick enough. Like he's held on to the ball a lot this year. And in the NFL, if you're like a half a yard open, you're open. So you got to throw the football. So hopefully like he starts giving his receivers a chance to get up and down the field.
It's almost like the earlier days of Jalen Hurts where he just held the ball, and he ran the football a lot. Like eventually you have to also anticipate throws and be able, like it happens multiple times in every game where the broadcast will show a guy running open or a guy who he could have, led open if he had have thrown the ball ahead of him. And he just doesn't. He prefers to, for some reason, throw these 50-50 balls, which Smith and Brown and Goddard give them credit. They make some of these catches, but they do not look easy. They are not easy catches to make when they could be made a lot easier. But it's all about, and his anticipatory throwing too. Jalen Hurts just doesn't seem to be there with that either. I don't know. I mean, we don't know if Jalen's hurt. If they're hiding this, it's one of the best hidden secrets Philadelphia, any NFL team has ever done, because people have been speculating this injury for weeks now, and there is not a beat reporter who has gotten any ounce of anything to show, yeah, Jalen Hurts is playing really banged up right now. Everyone's probably playing kind of banged up, but to the point that it's impacting Jalen Hurts' game to this extent, it's kind of weird that nothing has come out. And one more thing on the running. Seattle has given up over 170 yards the last 3 weeks. They played the 49ers, the Cowboys, and the 49ers. But I don't think the Cowboys' run game is that good. I think we have a better run game than the Dallas Cowboys. So the fact that they're one of those teams that help pump out over 170 yards rushing, we should be 150 plus yards rushing in this
McCarthy
game
did come
with
into the year.
ease.
The reason why they got rid of Kellen Moore was because they wanted to run the football more. And while Tony Pollard hasn't been good as the top back, they still stick with it, something the Eagles don't do. Steven says, let's target more than 3 people this game. Hell, Vic and McNabb would get 7 or 8 people ball every game. McNabb did do that too. He got a lot of people to ball.
When you said it, and you've said last week, Quez Watkins hasn't been good this year, but the least you can do is at least show that you're willing to throw the other players on the football field. That makes the defense respect you.
Yeah.
If they see you're throwing to just 3 guys, they don't have to respect. And if you're not throwing to the running backs, they don't have to respect near the line of scrimmage or, the screens with running backs or anything like that.
And the defensive line can just pin their ears back, knowing you're not going to run the ball or throw it to a back out of the backfield. So hopefully they fix that on the offense. Quentin says, agreed. Steve, it feels like Hurts predetermines where the ball is going to, mostly Brown and Smith, which is true.
It does. It looks like he looks around the field, and then he's looking around the field, and suddenly here goes that 20, 30-yard air pass where it's going to Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown, who is in double coverage or very sticky coverage, and he hopes that he catches a 50-50 ball. It doesn't feel like he takes the time to look at everything. And, we see other guys. We see Brock Purdy do it all the time. It's okay to use the running backs. It doesn't make you any less of a quarterback to use your running backs, to use those safety valves, to throw for 3 or 4 air yards and let the guys do some work. So that's what they're out there for.
You know how Sirianni overcompensates? First drive is going to be like 3 runs. Or he's going to throw the ball out. He'll do a running back screen or something. It's going to happen just because that's what they do. So that then you can say if it doesn't work, you can say, see, this is why we do what we do. But they're gonna overcompensate one way or the other this week. If the Eagles win the toss, do you think they should take the ball or go on defense first?
I think based on the injuries to the defense and based on how the defense has been playing, I think you take the ball and give it a go. You got to get your offense going, and I feel like the best way to do it is
the defense a lead
and get a lead. And no, we're not talking 3 points. Get out there and put 7 points on the damn board. I'm so tired of watching these first quarters or these initial drives where all they're doing is putting up 3 points, 6 points. And then you enter into the second quarter and it's a 6-0 game or something, or a 7-6 game and the other team's up, and suddenly the other team's running away with the game because we can't put points on the board. I think you have to we know the defense is struggling. We know the defense has injuries. We know the defense is banged up. The offense is as good as it's going to get. We're down Cam Jurgens. That is it. This is as good as it gets. You need to be able, I said at the start of the episode, you need to lean into this offense. This has to be an offense game. And you have to, if the defense gives up 21, don't sit there and say, oh, this defense sucks. Go and put up 22. You got to be out there putting up the points and helping them.
In this day and age in the NFL, if you're giving up 21, you should win.
You should, because this is an offensive happy league. Like, teams aren't giving up 7 points a game that much. Well, unless you're the Vikings and the Raiders in that game a couple weeks ago. Like, there's some games where you get those fluke games, but it just doesn't happen where you have a team that goes a full 17-game season now and gives up 10 to 15 points. It doesn't happen that often anymore. It's an offensive friendly league.
Yeah, the Niners and the Browns, like maybe 1 or 2 teams in it. Yeah. All right. So Eagles are traveling out west. Monday Night Football, their first of 2 in a row, because on Christmas Day they get the New York or New Jersey, I'm going to say, Giants for the first time this year. I can't believe we've gone the entire year and haven't faced the Giants, who of course are right now are winners of 3 in a row and are getting Darren Waller back. So yeah, that'll be fun, getting a team that's coming in hot. Iceberg Slim, thanks for joining us. He says, Philly fans, time to go on vacation. Season over without Slay. DK Metcalf does what he wants. Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith and Jigba are going to dismantle single coverage. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We thought Miami was going to, and I know Slay played, but we thought Miami, with all the motion and speed that they have, they were going to torch the Eagles defense. It didn't happen. So we'll see what happens. Anything can happen. It's going to be a close game. We mentioned it. They do have a lot of weapons. Steven says bad enough when you're one-dimensional. You would think being decisive with short checkdowns gets you in a rhythm. See, I don't know if that's Hurts, but we haven't seen it under Shane Steichen as the offensive coordinator, now Brian Johnson. I think it's a Sirianni philosophy that they just don't have checkdowns, and that bothers the hell out of me. If there's one thing I want him to change, it's that. Have a blitz beater. Have a blitz beater. They don't have blitz beaters, so you have a three-man route, and Dallas brings a blitz, and Hurts is sitting back there and has to wait. That doesn't help you. So hopefully they figure that out. And I mean, we've been saying it for 3 years under Sirianni. Get a blitz beater, get a man beat, or get a hot route, and they still don't have it.
And it's not the end of the world to do those things. Like I was saying earlier, it's not the end of the world to check down and let your guys do things. There's a reason Dallas Goedert is so good. Last season, he was leading tight ends by a landslide in yards after the catch before he got injured. That is just what he does. AJ Brown is a yak monster. And DeAndre Swift can do so much after contact, but you have to get the ball in their hands in a opportunistic way. And this just isn't happening in this offense. AJ Brown, he can catch 50-50 balls. Yes, he is a good 50-50 ball catcher too. But the best part of his game, the reason you paid him the way you did was because he does yards after the catch and he works the middle of the field
so well. Receivers like to catch the ball when they're open too, not just in 50-50.
And Dallas, when you have two guys who are so good at yards after the catch, two guys who were top 5 in the category last season at one point, why are you not using them in the middle of the field? We should dominate the middle of the field with Dallas Goedert and AJ Brown. And the fact that we're not is a testament to the struggles of this offensive game plan. Brian Johnson, Nick Sirianni, even Jalen Hurts not being able to say, hey guys, we need to get these guys involved in the middle of the field and get them doing what they're doing best. How hard is it to look back at last year pre-Dallas Goedert injury and see how much of an absolute monster he was after the catch? It just blows my mind that these guys, these coordinators, and even Jalen Hurts, someone isn't able to say, hey, guys, can we look at the film from last year and look at what we did with A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert? That worked.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. All right. Last couple minutes here. Give me 1 or 2 keys to the game. Your offensive player, your defensive player, and your final score for the Eagles and Seattle Seahawks Monday Night Football.
A key to the game on offense, run the football. You have to. This is a bottom 10 Russian defense. You have to do it. They've been dominated. I get it. We were dominated by these teams, the Cowboys and the 49ers too. And the 49ers definitely have a better run offense. I don't know if the Cowboys do. Like, you can definitely win this game on the ground and control and dominate the time of possession. Run the ball, dominate time of possession, get back to what we were doing best at the beginning of the year that got us those wins, whether ugly wins, whether pretty wins. This is one of those games with the defense banged up and with the defense back against the ropes that you need to win an ugly game, and it needs to come on the offensive side of the football, rushing the ball. Defensively, you got to get after the quarterback. Like, okay, we had a couple weeks where we played some pretty good offensive lines. This is a bad offensive line. This is a bottom 10. It's pretty much a bottom 6 defensive line or offensive line. You have to get after them. Whether it's, Sean Desai getting creative with pressure, or whether it's the front 4, doesn't even matter. The front 4, let's start with just primarily the front 4. They need to get home. It has to be Reddick, Cox, Davis, Sweat, Jalen Carter, Milton Williams, Nolan Smith. We see you. We see that you've been trying to make some plays. You've been getting some pressure. Those are the types of guys who need to get home, and it has to be the front 4 that do it. Whatever they decide to do from a, pressure perspective beyond the front 4 doesn't even matter. It's about the front 4. So with that in mind, I mean, I'm going with a DeAndre Swift game. I think DeAndre Swift has to have one of those games like we saw earlier in the season where he went for 100+ yards from scrimmage. Do it through the air, do it on the ground, get him involved as much as possible. This can be a game where A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are not as existent as they've been in prior games, because it means you're winning in other ways. It means you're dominating on the ground. So I'd like to see that type of game. And then defensively, I'm going to give it to Josh Sweat because Josh Sweat has kind of went a little quiet, and he was a guy who was doing really good earlier in the season. He's a guy who can get a lot of pressure. He's a guy who we know can win at the point of attack and needs to be able to get pressure and get a couple sacks and really help this defensive line get going. He's a guy that we paid, and he's showing spurts of doing well. This is one of those times where over these next 4 games, we need him to give us a spurt, one of those 4 to 8 sack spurts of games over these next 4 weeks. We definitely need that from Josh Sweat. So that's my keys to the game. That's my players to watch offensively and defensively. As for a score, I'm going with the Eagles. I'm super hesitant. I'm going with the Eagles with Geno playing or without Geno playing. And I'm going to go with, I don't think it's going to be all that pretty. I'm going 24-21.
24-21 Eagles. Okay. All right. So my offensive key is win time of possession, same as you. Win time of possession, run the football, and keep the ball out of Geno Smith in that offense's hand, because with the weapons that they have on the outside. The defense, force turnovers. Give the offense a short field every once in a while. If a team is driving, maybe punch the ball out so that they don't go and score a touchdown. I mean, did you see the stat last week? There was in an 11 drive span, they gave up 9 touchdowns, 1 field goal, and a kneel down. That was ridiculous. That can't happen if you want to go far in the playoffs. So force some turnovers off defensively if you're the Eagles. Win the time of possession offensively, run the football. My offensive player of the game for the Eagles is DeAndre Swift. He needs to be the focal point of the offense this week, running the ball, catching the ball. Give it to him. Let him do some damage. Let him get over 100. He is 4th in the league in rushing, and they don't use him. Imagine if they used DeAndre Swift the way they should use DeAndre Swift. He might not be up there. He might not be past McCaffrey, but he could be top. He could be 2nd. He's 4th in the league right now and just doesn't touch the football, it seems. And I mean, obviously he does, but it doesn't feel like it because he doesn't get the, that hefty workload, that the other running backs in the NFL get. And then defensively, I'm going to go Shaq Leonard. Now, look, I know this is going to be a second game with the Eagles, and he's kind of forced into a starting spot with Cunningham hurt and, not having Christian Ellis and Nick Morrow being the other linebacker. I'm not saying we're going to get the maniac, but I want to see somebody that, I want to see a little bit of what he was in the past. He's not going to be that Pro Bowl, All-Pro linebacker, but I want to see a physical guy, somebody that's able to stop plays over the middle, that gets to the running back when they run, that is able to get his hands on the ball. And Sirianni's talked about his wingspan. So I want to see Shaq Leonard do some damage, maybe tip a ball that gets picked off by, Reed Blankenship or something. I want to see him be very active and healthy, obviously. In terms of my final score, I'm going 27-24 Eagles. Again, very hesitant, just like you are. But this is the type of game the Eagles have to win after the last 2 weeks, because if they lose this, man, it's going to be all-time panic next week in the city of Philadelphia.
And just saying, I just wanted to throw that out there because I knew I had the stats. So I don't know if you saw this from James Nagel last week. When the Philadelphia Eagles, and you don't need tape, Sirianni and Brian Johnson, you don't need tape to see this. When they run the football 23 times or more, they are 30-6 under Nick Sirianni. When they run the football 23 times or less, they are 3-8. You don't need tape to see
now
what
how many
you need
of those
to start
rushes,
doing.
Though, are like the Jalen Hurts variety, like when Jalen was actually Jalen last year. Because that does make a difference. He opens up the run game. He opened up the run game for Miles Sanders last year. We haven't seen that with Swift, because you can only imagine what Swift would do if Hurts had to be respected as a runner, because teams really aren't respecting him as a runner. I would like a breakdown of that. So how many is Hurts running the ball 12 times a game? Something like that. Because I mean, it's a stat. It's a great stat. Obviously, when the Eagles are running the ball, that's because last year by halftime they had a 2-score lead, so they could run the ball the entire second half. This year they've been down by 2 scores, so they can't really run the ball. There's different things that go into that number, but that is obviously when the Eagles are running the football, it's because they're winning games.
And I mean, even if you take some of those out, like you said, with the respect in Jalen Hurts, I'm sure the record shifts, but it doesn't shift to the point. They're still way better when they run the football and when they focus on running the football first. There is a fun conversation going on in the chat over here, talking about. So Steven says BJ needs to listen to all voices equally if it ain't happening. Iceberg Slim says, "What doomed Philly is when your QB got exposed. He only throws the ball to three guys. This Mickey Mouse gimmick, smoke and mirrors offense has ran out of magic." And then they kind of, it's almost like this offense has illegal man, damn field paranoia. We saw a lot of those penalties, and it snatched away its creativity. Iceberg Slim makes a point of it's not a pro style offense. It kills the team, and it's hard to adjust when your offense is too simple. Agreed. No option routes. There really is no motion. There's no option routes. It is very simple. We kind of talked about that at the beginning of the episode, where that player that has come out and said that it's a predictable offense. Curls and slants are almost disappearing from the offense when they actually succeed. When they do, it makes no sense, especially the slants. Curls are curls, but slants, you got Dallas Goedert, you got AJ Brown. I talked about it. I just went on the rant earlier about it. The fact that they don't dominate the middle of the field and yards after the catch is absolutely mind-boggling. Iceberg Sim, we talked about this episode, or last episode. Philadelphia is not moving away from either of these coordinators. Byron, it would have to be a lose-out scenario, and I think someone might have to take some blame. But Byron, a lose-out scenario, I don't think we move on from Sirianni, Brian Johnson, or Sean Desai.
If Frank Reich wanted to come in a consultant variety, I would do it. Lincoln Riley's not leaving USC. At least that's where he's at now. I don't think he's going to leave USC. If he does, he's going to be a head coach in college somewhere. He won't be a head coach in the pros. But Frank Reich, if he's willing to, I mean, he's getting paid. Like, he got fired in the first year of a 3 or 4 or 5 year contract. He's getting paid. So he doesn't have to do anything if he doesn't want to. I doubt he gets a head coaching job again, but he's definitely going to probably get an offensive coordinator position. But if he doesn't and he wants to be a consultant, because, again, don't think Brian Johnson's going to get fired as much as we all want him to. But
I don't think any, like I said, it has to be a lose-out scenario. And even if we lose out, we probably make the playoffs. And I even think that then if you lose in the first round of the playoffs, then you probably really have to make somebody responsible. I just see no path that we lose out and somebody gets fired. I just don't see it. As much as people want this to happen, like I said, like we were saying on the Tuesday episode, we're a 10-3 team. Odds are pretty good. What we end up at worst, 11-6, 12-5. Yeah. So, I mean, you don't see people get fired from staffs with that type of record. It just doesn't happen, especially when you go and you look and it's like, well, the 49ers and Cowboys, the 49ers may very well go on to go and be in the Super Bowl. The Cowboys had a really good season. They're doing super well. You look back at those games and they're going to say those were just games. Those were blips on the radar against teams but I mean, we got destroyed by. But I mean, at the end of the day, it has to be a lose out and out in the first round type of scenario for someone to have to take responsibility and held responsible and get fired. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens this week. Before we finish up, Steven says the middle tight end screen needs to come back. Any type of screen needs to come back. I don't care which one, wide receiver screen, running back screen, tight end screen. It needs to come back. And then I always thought TJ Paganetti should have a bigger voice in this offense as he did under Steichen. Yeah, I mean, Steichen seems like the type of guy that's going to listen to everybody. I don't know if Brian, and he's done it before. He's been an offensive coordinator in the NFL before, so he kind of knows what to do and knows who he should listen to. You would think that somebody who's doing it for the first time would take all the input he can take, especially when he is, quote unquote, struggling. Again, the Eagles are averaging 27, 28 points a game and have a top 5 offense. So maybe from an inside, which is a bad thing. Maybe the inside, they don't think they're struggling because they have all the numbers, which is bad. They need to figure it out. Obviously, they are struggling to an extent. Thank you all for tuning into the Kelly Green Hour. We appreciate all the comments in the comment section. As always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHero54. And follow Edge of Philly Sports on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook at Edge of Philly Sports. We'll be back on Tuesday probably to give our reaction to the Monday night game between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Seattle Seahawks. For Connor, I'm LJ. Thank you for tuning in to the Kelly Green Hour.
Fly, Eagles, fly.